This is Jung's Individuation, Bohm's Coherence, and Nietzsche's Becoming, inquiry into the fragmented self and society through the tension of opposites. So why now? What is the nature of self and the future of society as I see us in a crisis of fragmentation? I've listed a few we might see across the globe and the United States here. So my interests, especially in this program, have been drawn to the philosophical, psychological, existential, religious, cultural, and phenomenological answers that may be available within ourselves to be brought to the surface. Life being what it was, I've been drawn towards the meaning of suffering for a long time. From a young age, when religion was not providing the answers I needed, I eventually found my way into an existential humanistic perspective. In my work, I've been oriented around Yalom's 4 existential givens, or what we could call the existential tension of opposites. Studying Jung this term has integrated my inquiry, an inquiry that has never left me, the use of religious symbols for individual and societal orientation towards individuation. I experience myth and symbols as no doubt providing an essential depth towards the psychological, participatory, creative, and integrative work that presumes the unconscious is alive with meaning and can bring us more fully into the self and into relationship with each other. I'll start with the overarching inquiry of this presentation. What is the future of consciousness and humanity? The fictional representation shows me sitting with 6 figures who have provided a foundational base to my first year of inquiry in the Psychology, Religion, and Consciousness program. Nietzsche has long been a figure in my existential studies, while last fall I wrote about Fromm's humanistic religion as a potential path forward in our society. In our Foundations of Consciousness class, I analyzed physicist David Bohm's concepts of wholeness and the implicit order through the lens of Richard Wagner's opera, Tristan und Isolde. This specific work was especially influenced by Arthur Schopenhauer, whose major work, Will and Representation, was influenced by Hinduism and Buddhism, influencing many thinkers, including Carl Jung. With Jung's concepts of the self, archetypes, individuation, and the collective unconscious, along with other concepts like complexes, synchronicity, and the transcendent function, it has been Carl Jung who has really brought this conversation of thinkers towards wholeness for me. A parallel interest of mine during this current era of social upheaval has been to look at the history and thoughts surrounding World War II, as they may give us some things to think about during this time. All of these men were connected to the war in some way, and to me, these stories display shadows that can exist around thought, often usurped by individuals or the collective. So Hitler was obsessed with Wagner, who was an anti-Semite, and interpreted some of his operas and writings through his own ideology of German nationalism, racial destiny, and heroic mythology. He severely misinterpreted the writings of Nietzsche and Schopenhauer, especially Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch, or the evolved man. Erich Fromm is a German-Jewish psychoanalyst and one of the earliest thinkers to formulate critical theory at the Frankfurt School, fled the Nazi regime in 1933, while David Bohm earned his PhD under Robert Oppenheimer, who asked him to join the Manhattan Project, though Bohm was denied due to incorrect accusations that he was affiliated with the Communist Party. And finally, Carl Jung was initially accused of being anti-Semitic, yet in 1936 wrote about the mass eruption of the collective unconscious, and later worked with the Allied forces, providing psychological interpretation of Hitler and others. I will not go through this table, but for my own understanding, I wanted to place their perspectives side by side to understand this movement of self to society. But to read one column, Carl Jung's perspective is that the human psyche is a complexity of conscious and unconscious elements striving towards wholeness. His understanding of the individual is through the concept of the self and individuation, archetypes, personality typologies, while his understanding of society is through the collective unconscious, bridging of science and humanities, and the tension of opposites. For the next 4 slides, after some big questions, I will compare 3 of these thinkers across spectrums or tensions of opposites. So we've been asking a lot of big questions in this class and in this program. I'll start with Nietzsche, who said, "God is dead," a terrifying cultural diagnosis of Western civilization, and him asking, what do we as humans do now? For the next thinker and his big question, Bohm said it's the incoherence in the system as a whole which produced Hitler, and formulating a question of, since everything is connected through an implicit order, how can fragmented thought become coherent? And for Jung, we accuse Germans of having forgotten it all again already, but the truth is that we don't know for certain whether something similar might not happen elsewhere. It would not be surprising if we did, and if another civilized nation succumbed to the infection of a uniform and one-sided idea. America and her mixed population finds it difficult to strike roots in a soil that is practically without history. So how can we, as individuals, as a nation, and as a world, become whole? And finally, my question, does human transformation begin with the individual, or must society change first? So now I'm going to take the spectrum of humanities and science and say that Nietzsche, for him, humanities, in the humanities realm, is that art creates value and meaning, that creativity reveals wholeness for Bohm, and that Jung says it's necessary for meaning, symbol, myth, and religion. While science does not hold absolute truth, it can become a new religion, that science, especially physics, has become too fragmented, and it's essential but leaves out symbolic representations. And when we place them along the spectrum, Nietzsche said that meaning is truly found in artistic expression and what we value. Bohm, that both emerge from one reality. Psychology unites both humanities and science. And that, for me, questioning what you think are answers and engage creatively. And the next slide of secularism and religion, we have under secularism that personal meaning is key. Science is the religion. That it fragments into confusion and it leaves no orientation, and we are deprived of myth. While under religion, Nietzsche saying God is dead, Christianity is a slave morality, and it fragments into dogma for Bohm, and archetypal realities become creeds when en masse. And to place them across the spectrum, where I think they might land, that the individual must create his own meaning, that there's a dialogue between that orients towards wholeness, that the individual transforms through transcendent symbols, and I believe that we need orientations towards potential realities beyond ourselves, and it is up to us to create that meaning. So for the next comparison of conscious and what Bohm would call explicate reality and the unconscious or the hidden implicate, that the conscious world is superficial and not truth, that the thoughts fragment or misinterpret actual reality, and that consciousness is a precondition to being and only a small part of the psyche. So for Nietzsche and the unconscious, which he said that it drives instinct and affect to be exposed and not systematic, like Jung said, that there is a deeper implicate order and hidden and invites participation, and that it's central to the psyche, symbolic and archetypal. So when we look at them across the spectrum, there's more reason in your body than in your best wisdom, and that the great activity is unconscious. Coherence emerges between explicate and implicate. There's a dialogue between that leads to individuation towards the self, and that for me, that depth orientation is essential towards coherence once ego strength is established. And lastly, the collective and the individual world, a spectrum, that society produces a herd mentality. Reality is fundamentally relational, and if only a worldwide consciousness could arise due to the splitting of opposites, then we could know where to begin. So become who you are, create your own values. Separate self is a product of fragmented thought, and that resistance to the organized mass can be affected only by the man who is well organized in his individuality as the mass itself. And to look across the spectrum, Nietzsche says to resist the herd and go your own way, to participate through an undivided whole through dialogue, that individuation requires relation to self and other, but not conformity, and know yourself as wholly as possible, but be open to shift and connection with the other. And so now, living with the big questions, let's see what maybe they would say to these answers. Nietzsche saying, what do we do now? You must be ready to burn yourself in your own flame. How could you rise anew if you had not first become ashes? For Bohm's coherence, how can fragmented thought become coherent? Even if a few people were to think together in a coherent way, it would have tremendous power in the culture and in society. For Jung, how can we become whole? For this, he needs the evidence of an inner transcendent experience which alone can protect him from the otherwise inevitable submersion in the mass. And me, does human transformation begin with the individual, or must society change first? Human transformation moves in both directions. We must be willing to shape ourselves and be shaped through dialogue with the other. While I will not go into this fully, I've been integrating Jung's concepts into an integrative, evolving, spiral, heuristic model of the self I began developing while writing my paper for the consciousness class, and I will continue in my paper for this class. This has assisted me in conceptualizing life stages across theories, while also allowing me to formulate where my clients may land in regards to individuation and wholeness. It could be interesting going forward to look at this type of model in connection to society and transformation as well. So each of these thinkers recognized a different form of fragmentation, of values, of psyche or thought. Yet Jung and Bohm pointed towards the possibility that human flourishing depends not on choosing one side of our divisions, but on cultivating a consciousness and a way of being capable of integrating them. Perhaps the future of both individual and society depends less on what we know, and as Nietzsche said, on becoming who we are. I truly believe there's a path forward to be found through our conversations with each other, with those who have paved the way before us, and ultimately within ourselves, as Jung said. I'm grateful for this program and the conversations we get to have as we all continue on our paths of individuation. So, in conclusion, I will leave with one of my favorite quotes, and the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps you will then, gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer. Thank you.